First of all, we want to thank all of you that came and those that are streaming into the meeting. We're trying a little something different this time. We had some feedback from people that said, hey, I'm still working, and so your 3 o'clock meetings don't work so well for us. We really would like to have something later or on a weekend, and so we tried the 5 o'clock time frame this time. So that's the reason why we moved it from an earlier time frame, and we'll evaluate that and see how we do. But we do want to make these things available to all of our members so that they can come if they so desire. Again, thank you for coming. There's a couple things that I want to try to outline that we're going to try to cover tonight. This whole meeting is about the 25 budget. It's not a board meeting. It's not a workshop. It's not a town hall. It's about the 25 budget. So we're going to have a presentation here that is going to go through at a higher level, and we certainly will take questions about the 2025 budget and that type of thing. I also want to point out that we're not going to try to go into a whole lot of detail here tonight because it could just go on ad nauseum. So what we're going to encourage people to do is, you'll see an email thing at the end of it, and we're going to encourage you to write your questions in. And that does two things. Number one, we get the question the really way you mean it. And number two, it allows us to do the analysis and the research to make sure we fully answer your question. And number three, we will post the answers to all questions back up on the website. There'll be a frequently asked question kind of thing, and we'll put it right up there. So with that in mind, and again, thanks again for coming, I'm going to turn it over to our treasurer, Bruce Horn. Oops, don't you dare.
Yeah, that's one way to get out of the presentation, fall over and concuss myself. Thank you all. Thanks for showing up on this cold day. Appreciate it. Let's get into this for you. Many of you, most of you, know all of the board members, but this year we have a couple of new. It's Monica Heisel and Mary Kay Jacobson is the new members that have joined us this year. And of course, at the top of the list for the staff is Bill Ward. And down here we have Jason Lambert, who is our new CFO, Director of Finance. You know, I hope you know everybody else on the list because they have been the wonderful staff that have been with us for a long time and helped us get to where we need to be. Want to acknowledge the Major Capital Projects Committee and the Financial Advisory Committee, particularly the FAC, that helped put this together and worked so hard to get these numbers and work with the SMTs as well to get these numbers and get this information together for us. Here we go. Let's start with sewer. Let's look at the 2025 budget and all of these ending numbers. Now, it's interesting, you see the sewer taps. Why is it down in our forecast for the budget for next year, for this coming year? It's because some things we didn't get to were capped to the number of taps that we can get into. We had engineering equipment and permitting issues, and we're in the process of building these things out, but not until they're completed can we tap into them. The big number here that's interesting that we want to get to is the ending cash balance for the year. We start with 3.3 and we're going to end with 3.4 for our ending cash balance on sewer operations. Sewer net, here again, it's the bottom number. If you look at the total number at the end, the ending cash balance, that's the end result. We're right on line with the projections and budget from 2024. So we look to be pretty good. We've got a lot of things in the pipeline that are going to be started. which include the collection system expansion. The force main is coming up this year, and as well as the regular capital. But the force main is the big one this year for sewer up. POAs. Again, 2025, we have an increase on the admin line. This is where the money comes from our POA assessments. This is the fees that we all pay every month. The bottom line down here is a subtotal on all of these activities where the money is going. As a quick update on all of these, the police department, there isn't a reduction, is not a reduction in what the support of the community club. It is a contract that fire hydrant maintenance is now coming back into the community club. So that would be taken over with that contract. Operating results. Now here, again, the big news is right there. Out of all of this spending and collecting, we are at essentially a balanced budget. This is a big operation. This community, this corporation that we are, is a very big deal. And we worked very through difficult times and conversations to make sure that we got to a balanced budget for us all. Some different numbers on all of the different amenities. I'm sure you're going to ask about food and beverage, and we'll address that in the Q&A session, but revenues didn't meet expectations. It was too an aggressive budget in 2024. The 2025 budget is what it is. This is what we're going with. Everything else is growing. Major capital projects. Now, we talked about this. If you recall, back in July, this is part of that conversation. This is ongoing. This is the things in 2025 that we were talking about. The fire in the EMS Station 1, 1.6 for this year to get that project started. Core Master Plan Study, 100,000. The community has grown since, well, it's just grown like topsy. And we've run out of administrative spaces and meeting spaces. One of the things that the community has asked for is more social areas, how to play cards, where do you play cards, where do we gather? We have to look at that and anticipate where we need to go. That's part of this 1.7 for capital projects. Our amenities. Here again, when we talked about in July, the presentation about the 10-year capital plan. This was the big number for the Druid Hills Complex and the Racket Center. Those were two items that are part of the major capital projects, and we're starting that now in 2025. Capital funds. We're starting, here we are we're starting this year with this, the net revenue. If you look down here in the corner, all of these totals, the reason that this number looks quite so big is not because we're necessarily going to use it, but we have to account for that line of credit that we're going to tap into. But these are all of the pieces and parts of the capital expenses for this year that we've identified. Again, if you look at our beginning capital reserve, we started this year at this budget year at 2.8, and we anticipate, well, we will finish at 4.7 as cash reserves. The operating reserve, again, we started with a beginning balance of 5.5, and we're ending with 4.4. Again, we have, these are transfers out of the fund to fund our active projects. What this does out of this reserve, we are funding 100% of 2025 projects. That's very good news, because we're not doing anything that was unanticipated. This is the one that you were waiting for. The amenity fees in general will increase. A reminder that 2% of the amenity revenue is allocated to capital funds. That does not include the fees coming off of food and beverage. That's not part of that equation. This is the one that we want to focus on here for a moment. Back in July, we made the presentation that we were looking to hold everything for that 10-year capital plan to an assessment between $4 and $8 without going into extraordinary means. With the budget that we've put together and the work that everybody has participated in, the increase is $5 this year with no increase in sanitation and sewer. That's very good news, because people were worried that, oh my gosh, we're going to go. That's why we used a range of $4 to $8, because we were comfortable with giving that range, and we got there. Now, this slide I'll just touch on for a moment to note the 60-75. That's that out of, as you know, out of that $81, 75% of it stays, or only 25% of it stays, it goes to capital. That's the cap that can be done. 75% stays in the community, in the POAs. This is just to show an allocation percentages, but the 60-75 is the net of that. A question had come up earlier, why do we have this and showing a different number? This is the first time that we've taken that 25% out to show what really my assessments go to. Now, I've breezed through these fairly quickly. And I'm going to ask our General Manager, Bill Ward, to come up and join me for your questions, and we'll address them, and we'll go back to whatever I've blown through for you. But
Okay.
So
any questions?
Yeah, Bruce Cox. I'm going to take Greg's advice and send you my other questions, but I just have two. The dollar revenue that we've gotten, how much is that $1 revenue create in total revenue? $1 increase of assessment, how much is that?
I'll get you the exact amount.
Well, I'd like to have that so I can study through the budget, okay? And then the second question I have is, what was the % increase in labor cost to 2025?
Have you got the,
In 2025, the percentage increase is a 57% increase, which is $2.80 in salary and wages increase. Of the $5 increase, 57% of that is labor alone. The total percentage increase overall is 10%.
So you use
10% increase.
10% increase in labor. Okay, all right. Thanks. Bruce, I'll send you the other questions I've got.
yes, thank you.
I've got a real quick question and clarification on Tier 1 lots. My understanding was Tier 1 lots are, has a paved road, water and sewer, and either does or does not have a house on it. Is there a differentiation between a Tier 1 lot that has a house or one that does not have a house in the price structure?
No. A Tier A lot is a Tier A lot, full stop.
Okay, so if I've got a piece of land that's on water and sewer, I'm paying
And a road.
$81 and a road.
Yeah.
I'm paying $81 a month.
Yes, sir.
If I build a house on it, I'm still paying.
$81 a month.
Thank you.
You're actually going to pay total more because you've got your sewer now that you're attached fee, but your POAs is going to be $81. Yes, sir.
Bruce, I have a question.
Hi, Jerry.
How are you doing? Jerry Miller. Since you've juiced up the numbers used to close the stables by over $1 million, how can we trust any of this? Huh?
I didn't hear the question.
You didn't hear the question. I'll say it again.
Okay.
Since the board has juiced up the numbers used to close the stables, how can we trust any of this? Did you hear that? Did you get that question?
Okay. Thank you, Jerry, but that's not relevant to this conversation.
Let's go ahead. We knew that this topic was likely to come up.
Very relevant to the budget, Greg. I'm
right.
sorry. You may want to hear it.
I'm
We
going-
heard
Very
the-
relevant.
we heard
I'm going to try
question.
to answer your question, Jerry. Would you give me a chance,
Okay.
please? Number one, we had made mistakes on the spreadsheet. We've owned up to that. Number two, your figures are not correct. Number three, the decision has been made. And that decision is going to stay. So we are not going to talk about the stables tonight. If you want to do that, come to a board
I'm
meeting
talking
or a
about
board
budgets,
workshop.
Greg. I'm
But
talking about
it's not
budgets.
in the budget. There are a small amount of funds in the budget for the stables, but it's for cutting the grass and that type of thing. There's about, I think, what, $40,000, I think? 30? Maintenance.
There's
That's all
maintenance
it is.
down there. We're
There
not gonna
are no
pull
other
electricity.
budget numbers in there for the stables.
Nico Sergio, community club member since April of 2005. Could we back up to page 5, please?
5, sure.
Sewer operations. That's the right page. The first line is sewer taps.
Yep.
I went out and looked at the general assessments and other fees for 2024, and the tap fees were not included in that. So I had to go back to 2023. The sewer tap fees are $7,910. In the September meeting, Sam McAdoo said there were, through August, there were about 75 homes that were building permits issued or something like that. Now, not every building permit is, I don't know when they put in the tap fee for the sewer, whether they do it as soon as the permit's there or before the house can be occupied or whatever. Nope. But that kind of relates to about 100 tap fees a year. So according to this confusion for me is you're saying next year we're going to have $613, which kind of leads people to believe in, especially myself, we're putting a moratorium on building, allowing any new houses in Fairfield Glade. And I wanted to know, in 2024, you budgeted a loss of $95,000, and if we had like 80 or 90 homes at close to $8,000 apiece for sewer tap fees, this doesn't make any sense.
That's, Nico, that is net from operations. That,
You should be stating the income that is coming in for sewer taps. And then if you have employee costs, that's a different issue. But sewer tap fees should be the gross amount of the sewer tap fees by the number of tap fees you've done for the year.
it's not, that's not net of operations.
Could you speak into the mic?
Oh, that's not net of operations.
What
It's
you're
not a
asking
net
for is
number.
not what's listed in this slide. We will be glad to get you that information for you.
Yeah.
Well,
because
what good does this slide do us?
Because it's net, it's the net of operations from, of year-over-year comparison from net of operations. It's not total income.
Yeah, but what good does that do us?
Revenue minus operations. So if you want that number, I don't, and I apologize that Bruce Evans couldn't be here tonight, but I can get that back up. Jonathan, if you have it, but you can submit that question and we will forward that information.
I
But
guess
that's not
it's-
what this slide, this is a summary. We didn't have that on this particular, that's not what that line is saying. How you're interpreting is not what it's saying.
So are you doing the same thing for amenities? You're not giving us the income from amenities, you're just giving us the
net.
profit margin, or what?
Yeah,
Are you continuing this process throughout this whole budget?
yeah,
So
yes, yes. It's net.
That doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
That's a comment, not a question. Thank you.
Let me just make a comment, Bruce, I'm sorry. Nico, we have always done net. I was in his job for 5 years, and I presented his budget for 5 years, and we've always done net budgets. It's just how we manage the place, so.
So it's still net.
How can the members then figure out if something, some accounting, how can we figure out if this is an honest accounting? Because we're not getting all the figures here, and it's very confusing.
Hi, Tom.
Tom Ratcliffe. Could you go back to slide 8 for a minute for me, please?
Is that?
It's the, no, keep going. Right there.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I can get a stool, maybe. So, and I'm not going to belabor, but I'm just going to ask you to, again, when you look at admin, you made the comment, that's our revenue. That is not correct, that my understanding. That understanding is that is a net number, correct, Jonathan? It has our revenue from dues and so forth, as well as other expenses in it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I would ask, so it's not confusing, especially when you present it that way, that you break it out and say revenue, top line, and then just like the rest going all the way down, those are all the expenses. Is that possible? It's a question.
These are not expenses. This is the net from operations. This is the total for each department.
Okay. Okay,
Some of those departments don't even have revenue.
okay.
Most of them do not. The
Most of them
amenity
do
side
not.
do. These are the POA side. The next slide, it's two parts to the slide, and the
Right.
next part
This is POA.
carries over into the amenity side, where
This is the
revenues are
amenities.
generated.
Right, right,
This is page 2.
right. Okay, I won't belabor the point. If you flip back,
I mean, if you want to say food and beverage, we're not giving you the entire food and beverage budget. It's saying of total revenues projected, total expenses, the net for next year is a $94,000 projected surplus. It's a budget summary. So it's not every departmental sheet. And that is not, that's what's being presented, and to my understanding has always been presented. This is very comparable to what's been done in the years past. But again, if you have specific questions relative to those, feel free to submit them, and we will get that information back to you.
And I'll submit it. I've said this before. This is a forum where it's helpful for everybody to hear the answers to questions, to hear the question first and to hear the answers. But I get it. I'm not going to belabor it. Anything on these 5 categories?
I mean, I could give you, sorry, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you. My apologies.
In the 2024 projection, is there anything in those 5 categories that are being deferred to 2025?
Yes.
And about how much is that? I see community maintenance that does a big dip and then rises again in a big time way.
Yeah, there's, that's
This is desilting. Large portion of this is desilting that could not be permitted and completed in 2024.
Okay.
For lake desilting is a big number.
It is.
And
there's paving.
Okay. So last year, when you were telling us that we needed to dues increase, and we increased them, and now we move some of that into next year, and we have to raise the dues further to cover them. It's kind of how my mind is wired. I know that's not how you went through it, but I just wonder, in total, how much that money is. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so you wanted the question, so I'm going to be the one to ask it, and that is food and beverage, $600,000 off a budget, and all of a sudden you're going to convince me that we're going to improve it by $300,000 next year? What is that coming through top line revenue, or how is that happening?
As I've been saying since I got here, and I think it's pretty obvious, the budget that was approved for 2024 was very aggressive from a revenue standpoint. What has been done in preparation for the 2025 budget is that we have had a subcommittee from the FAC in conjunction with myself, with Bobby Jones Link's corporate representatives, as well as with Linda James, the new food and beverage director, have all had meetings and have discussed what the plan is and what their proposal is and what our concerns and input is. What was done in 2025 is they to bring it to a centralized focus is went back to 2023 performance, which was realistically, it was a year that showed under Bobby Jones Links in their first year what was able and capable of being achieved. What went on this year, mistakes that were made, issues they encountered and the like, we're well aware of. But we went back to 2023 and said, okay, you've shown you can do this in 2023. That's what we're going to base our budget on for 2025, knowing also that there are increases in salaries, increases in expenses, but what is a more realistic budget? And that is what that number ends up under that analysis. And that, to my understanding, is a much thorough analysis and effort that has been done in recent years. No offense to anyone, but that's where we are in what we're proposing. And we will work and do everything that I can do, and a lot of good things have been done to improve in this situation. And we will continue to monitor it and to stay on it in the coming year and look forward to a very positive and productive year.
Thank you. And about how much of that projected deficit for 2024 is the fact that we're closing in December? So in other words, there's got to be something, you know, a loss during that period. We are losing revenue. Are we paying the employees or are we laying them off? How much is kind of built into that for that 1 month?
In the projection,
Yeah,
I
roughly.
believe
Give
it
me
was.
a ballpark.
We're not, again, we're not completely closing down. We're moving to Dorchester. We are operating, and we're going to have some events as well that'll be available to increase revenue. Some employees are taking time off that they have earned, that have chosen. We're going to go ahead and take that time off, and we're going to make it as close to what we have projected as possible. But it's inevitable that it had to happen, and it's unfortunate that it had to happen, but that's what we're dealing with.
Okay. Thank you for that. Just one last thing and overall on the budget. You gave us a spreadsheet in July, and in that spreadsheet, it was part of the reserve study in the presentation that you had, and it outlined capital spending 2024 through 2033, year by year.
Yeah.
And you broke out all of the capital spending by amenity, POAs, all the way down. And then you also gave us the capital funding, the projections, year by year. It was a great spreadsheet. It was helpful. You obviously felt it was helpful for us to understand. Could you incorporate the numbers for 2024 and 25 against the numbers in the spreadsheet for us, so we can see, as an example, when you told us that you were going to spend $16 million in 2025, is that what we're spending? And you told us that we were going to have revenue of just over 18 million, and you broke it all out, that we can kind of see that.
And that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Tom. And the reality is, just like anything else, the 10 million is going to be spent on Druid this budget year. I don't want to make too big a deal of this, but we have to put a marker in of what we're going to spend in the reserve study. And just because we say you have to project it out, so we have to put a marker in, but to build something, it still takes a period of time, and that would fall over a budget year. That is why I absolutely agree with you that that is very important. That's why we put it up there. That's why we did that. I couldn't agree more, because then we can track it, and we can't ignore it, and we have to account for those expenditures for things that either break or don't get to their useful life, or a thing that we're planning on building is going to take 2 years rather than 6 months. So there's a lot of that. And that is why it's such an important tool, because every department head, everybody now uses that. That's what we build on. That's what we're going to use going forward. That's why it was such a very big deal. It really was, because that hadn't been done before. And we were just shotgunning stuff. And if it isn't in the budget, it ain't in the budget. And we'll put things in as Druid, the moment that Druid is completed, it'll go into the reserve study. Everything does. Everything that we build now is going to go into that. And it has to, so that maintenance can be tracked. So we know when something is going to fail, or at least get an idea of the lifespan of it. So, but the short answer is, yeah, and it is updated regularly.
Hi, my name is Carol Schell. In my pre-retirement life, I was a general manager, so I have sympathy for you, Bill. But the budget process was always a bear of a time, and I relied extensively on the input from various departments that worked for me. And there was a lot of back and forth on that. And so I guess my question is a process question here. I know there are a number of committees that interact and work along with the board, and I'm wondering how much interaction there is. Let's say, for example, something comes from a committee that you as a board disagree with in whole or in part. What is the process then? Do you come back to them, or do you just ignore what they've said and just kind of go on and do your own thing? That's kind of my process question.
Well, as a general manager, I'll speak to that. As you know, all all committees are advisory to the board, and certainly those concerns, issues, wants that committees express are weighed against the entire operation, as well as in how they play out from a priority of need when it comes to a budget. And difficult decisions have to be made at times. And some things have to be either not achieved or postponed. But I can tell you the budget process, and it will continue to evolve under my leadership, but the process begins quite early, and we are actually looking at in a meeting with the board next week and what we're talking about for the process going forward. And I will speak to that for 2025, because I did come in midstream in this particular fiscal year. But the board will meet in May of each year going forward. They will set the overarching goals of the organization as spelled out and endorsed through the strategic plan, as well as any other issues that may have arisen or that play into that strategic plan and those initiatives that have been outlined, the 7 key initiatives in the strategic plan that was presented to you earlier this year. And that will be the direction that is given to myself and the SMTs for that particular year. As you're looking at a strategic plan, 5, 10 years, you're breaking it down into each fiscal year. So now the SMTs are then charged to how in their respective areas of influence that they can best develop their budget and their services and their product to best meet those needs and those goals of the overall organization. That gets tie-in engagement from the staff. We are allowing, going forward for the first time this coming year, select SMTs on a rotating basis over the years will be serving in an ex officio advisory role to the Strategic Planning Committee, so that they are providing the information as professionals readily and to the Strategic Planning Committee and to the board through the Strategic Planning Committee on what is best and what their particular feedback is on some of these items. But that then gives them input and a role in the overarching goals of the organization and the community, and then we build that budget over the course of the summer with those goals in mind. That is then presented to the FAC on or about mid-August, and the FAC, your Financial Advisory Committee, will then participate for a course of at least a month in reviewing that budget. They will have representatives from the FAC that ideally, and we have already discussed this, will be assigned to particular departments to help collect data and understand those particular areas better so that they can educate their own peers, your peers that serve on that committee, as to where it's coming from and why the SMTs or why we're proposing this. And then the FAC makes their recommendation of that budget to the board. So anyway, and then the board owns it for that next period. But again, there are, as you know from, I'm sure, your professional experience, oftentimes when things have to be weighed against the greater good and the larger picture.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, and I do understand what you're saying. And it sounds like this will be a welcome improvement in terms of the amount of time that the various advisory committees are given to actually look at a budget before it is then just completed. Otherwise, they kind of feel like, I would imagine, a number of the committees may feel like they've put in an awful lot of volunteer hours and a lot of hard work, and they're not really getting any explanation as to why what they recommended was just turned down or put down or just shelved. So if you want people to continue to volunteer to be on these committees, and they are all, some are more labor intensive than others, I think your approach of giving them more time to interact with the board and then have the board get back to them in a timely fashion so that they can then digest what you've said and then get back to you is a welcome improvement. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My full name is Dr. Arthur J. Lendo. Donna Jean and I have been full-time residents here for 7 years. If we could refer, please, to the slide under Reserve Fund, kindly. Thank you, Bruce. Operating Reserve Fund.
Oh, wrong way, sorry.
These figures seem to indicate that the board plans with the 2025 budget to further draw down the reserve fund balance from 5.8 million to 5.5. That's what those figures seem to suggest. This appears to be in direct contradiction to the reserve fund study that was undertaken. So on the one hand, I think the board deserves a lot of credit for having the foresight to having conducted this study years ago. And I could say a lot about that. As a retired CEO with decades of experience, the reserve funds are a critical element of long-term financial stability. This indicates we're drawing down. And yet the fund clearly stated, a professionally conducted study said, we're underfunded. And it said we're going to be in real trouble in 2030, and I mean underwater financially, if the board doesn't take decisive, positive action. What is the board's position on funding financial reserves for this budget and subsequent budgets going forward?
I didn't hear you. The amenity reserve.
Okay. We take very seriously the need for the reserves. Matter of fact, the first reserve study that was done here was done in 2023. There was not one before that. Now, luckily, and some people around the table will say not so luckily because they don't believe it was the right thing to do, but luckily, we did have underruns in budgets for prior years, and that's how we got to the original, like, I think last year the ending balance was like 6.9 million, 6.6 million, something like that. Our plan is, if you go back and take a look at the 10-year plan, okay, for capital, we did not plan on funding, increasing funding in the first 2 years. That is a planned activity. And after year two, and I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me, so I got to talk in generalities because I don't want to give numbers that aren't right. But the overall deal is that after the 2 years, then the funding starts coming up. A lot of that's going to have to do with the amenity reserve fee. That's one of the reasons why we raised it. And it's got to do with that kind of funding that's going to start kicking in.
Right.
So, okay.
Greg, once again, as I said, the board is to be complimented for their foresight about this. But once again, the study was very clear. It offered 4 options or alternatives to start immediately. And essentially, all of them included around $2.5 million annually to refurbish or start to restore the levels.
Well, understand that reserve study did not take into account our capital plan going forward. It only took into account what the current assets were, okay? So we have to take a look at a broader picture of that rather than just take a look at the reserve study as it sat in 2023. Assets are being added, we're making improvements, all that kind of thing has to happen, and a reserve study is not a fixed thing, it's a static thing, it moves. So that's the reason why, but the plan, if you take a look at the 10-year plan that we have outlined, you will see that we get to an acceptable industry standard of funding, but it's going to take us some years to get there. Now, if you wanted to get there a whole lot quicker, that means everybody's going to start paying more because that's the only way we get funds.
How are you defining acceptable industry standard?
We
for the reserve?
have information. We checked about this when we did the reserve study. You know, there's some people that think, well, you got to have that reserve study done, or I'm sorry, you have to have the reserves for 100% of your assets. Yeah. That's like saying in your home, I know that everything in my home is going to break next year, so therefore I got to fund all my air conditioning, all my roof, all my walls, everything else. That's not what most people do. The ranges that we've heard, and these are wide ranges, we're anywhere between 30 and about 65 or 70% of what your asset base is. Right. We're going to be in the middle of that. I can't remember the exact figure. Jonathan, you might have it. Yeah, 52%. I thought it was 50-something. So that's where we're headed, Arthur.
Okay.
And that's our plan. But rather than try to get there all in 1 year, because that would be a pretty big outlay of cash, we're going to take several years to get there.
I don't think the study suggested that we get there all at one time.
No, but there have been
suggested we get started.
Yeah, and we are.
And are we?
Yes, we are. Take a look at the plan, because the plan really.
I've looked at the plan. I've read every study. I've attended every meeting, Greg. Let's put that aside, okay? I'm looking at those numbers. You're drawing down by $300,000.
Yes.
You're not adding to.
Yes.
How does this help?
The first 2 years of that plan showed that we were not going to be funding additional funds. It picks up in year 3. So that's been our plan.
Right.
Yeah.
17%.
Yeah.
This number right here
is 17%.
By 2030, as Jonathan was saying, we'll be at 30%.
No, 52.
2035.
2035 is 52,
2030 will be at 30%, and 2035 will be at 52%. So that's the 10-year, and 52% is an industry standard, and community clubs and private clubs is a very acceptable range.
Well, once again, I want to urge the board to take a very serious look at this. My 30 years of experience says this is a ticking time bomb, and we've done the research. Between 60 and 70% is considered a minimum now. You have your research, okay. Other resource and research sources say 60 to 70% minimum. I urge the board to seriously take another look at reserve funding. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ellie Kellerman. I've been here. Ellie Kellerman. I've been here since 2005, an owner. I want you to go to the sewer overview 2025 projects and regular capital. Whoa, you went back. There. Okay, my question is, in 2021, we had a sewer system master plan come out. In that master plan, the second paragraph of the summary said that our daily flow is approximately 1.46 million gallons, which is overcapacity of 1.2 million gallons. This is 80% greater than the average, and they project that the year 2025 we are going to be 100% over capacity. In this study, they said that we needed to build the plant to handle the 2.0 million gallons. It was estimated it would cost $10,889,000. I'm surprised. This is the year 2025. How come we aren't addressing this? If you put that in today's figures, it is going to be 11,500,000 plus. Now, I don't know if anybody gets the Chattanooga Times, but there has been articles in there that the state of Tennessee is making a database on waste management. They are going by county. Right now, they have 73 counties. There's 22 counties that have not been addressed. Cumberland County is one of them, has not been evaluated yet. So far, they have identified 278 waste management systems within Tennessee. Of these, they can be sanctioned in two different ways. One, they can get a letter of an enhancement, or else they can give a moratorium. Right now, there are 70 sewer systems that have letters of enhancement. 57 are municipalities, 7 are private industries such as us, 4 are schools, and 2 are Tennessee institutions. As for moratoriums, they come by and say, no more connections. In essence, they say this is the end of new development. Right now, they have 50, wait a minute, got the next page, hang on. They have, can't find the page, I think it's 54 that have moratoriums against them. So my concern is, are we going to hit a moratorium in the future because we have not kept our main system up to date? That's my question. Should that be in our budget?
I don't know where to begin on that.
I'll be happy to have, if you want to submit that in a question, and Bruce Evans, I'll be happy to meet with him,
Right.
and we will provide a detailed answer to that. I'm not aware of any moratoriums that are being forecasted for Fairfield Glade, but again, Bruce could not be here tonight, but I will follow up with him, and we will get you that answer.
Right.
If
I
you could-
remember a
if you could
conversation.
phrase that question in a more concise way through the email, that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot to chew on there because I recall a conversation back in, I think it was 20 or 21 about that topic, and I think it was addressed. Then there was about different ways that the sewer department were going to deal with the drip fields, or there's a lot of old information, and it was discussed at that time. But if you'll submit all of that in writing, it'd be a lot easier to answer your question, because there's some historical data there, obviously.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just was clarifying for all of you here and those that are watching, and for the record on the recording that'll be on the website. These questions and answers will be posted on the website for everyone to see. So they will be available. And we are, Ms. Jacobson is keeping copious notes here of the questions that are being asked so that we are sure to make sure we have those documented. Okay?
Yep.
My name is Mike Epler. I'm a member in good standing, I think. It just depends on who you talk to, right? So, right, exactly. So I've got two questions. The first is, as a member, the most important thing I've got is the member equity line on the balance sheet. And in our accounting practices, we've kind of delineated different types and ways of looking at our equity and the way that we invest our capital and the way that it reflects in the equity line. And just a question of, as we move forward, is to make sure that whatever capital expenses we invest into the community, that we're reflecting that correctly in the balance sheet. To reflect that, to ask that, we do that,
Yes.
if that be possible.
Yes.
The second question is really to my fellow members, and that is, we kind of get cranky about the food and beverage operations and its costs, but when was the last time you went to Stonehenge and participated in that amenity with that? Awesome, thank you. That's a good thing, and that's the most important point, right? And to look at that amenity as the pennies that we invest as POA and the revenues off of our valued, beloved, welcomed guests is nothing. We generate $13 million in revenue off of our guests and our friends that are members in our timeshare community, and we generate about $9 million off of our POA. And in relationship to both of those, even $200,000 of $23 million is a little bit, right? The second question is when have you participated in a committee or relationship with a committee, and encourage you to engage with those committees and those folks, and to give your input with that. I can say from personal experience, the board does listen to those committees. It does. It does. I get the tensions with that, but I'm just saying they do listen, and with that is, at a human level, we all live in community together, and we live with this. And really, at an operational level, is what do we value most? What do we participate in most? What do we really care about most? Right? Our house value, our amenities that we participate in, the things that we hold most dear, right? And so I encourage you, fellow members in good standing, is put that energy at a positive level for how we can best help grow the club. And let's do it through that balance sheet on our member equity line.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, seeing that there are no more questions, thank you all for being here this evening, and we appreciate you very much. Have a good evening.